Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on January 25th, 2012, picking up a few hours after our last recording. And what we're doing here is we are fine-tuning our mouse gestures for WeWikiPaint. And in the last couple of episodes, we got the mouse to stop drawing and stop dragging when it moves outside the drawing area. We handled the case of the mouse coming into the drawing area. And we also handled the case of not selecting text if the drag started within the drawing area. And I'll show all that in a moment, except it's not working on IE8. So let me just show you what we've got. If we leave the mouse area, it stops drawing. If we start outside the mouse area, it doesn't draw. And it won't select any text when you drag out, which makes it feel really solid. It's a much nicer behavior than your typical web browser behavior, which is to draw blue stuff all over the place. So we do want it to select, but not when we're doing a drag gesture. So that's all working, except, and it's all tested. Here's our test right here. Working great. It works everywhere except for our favorite browser in the world, IE8. Yes, if we drag and drop in IE8, we get all kinds of fun stuff. Let's go ahead and load this up again. You can see a funny little mouse pointer showing up. You can see that it's selecting everything all over the place. It's just nasty. It's so terrible. So, and that's because IE8 doesn't support the same event model that modern browsers do. Now, I have it on good authority that IE9 does. I haven't tested it yet. So what we need to do is get this working on IE8. And between episodes, I did a little bit of research, and I found that there is a way to stop the events from the default event behavior on IE8. So just to clarify, what's happening here is when I push down the mouse and start drawing, that mouse down event bubbles up through the various levels of the DOM up to a default browser behavior. And that default browser behavior is the thing that makes us select text. And the way you stop that default browser behavior is with this line of code right here, prevent default. And last episode, I started out trying to solve it by saying prevent propagation, but actually preventing propagation and preventing the default browser behavior are two different things. So we say event.prevent default, that prevents the default browser behavior, and it doesn't select. Except, of course, IE8 doesn't support that method. So what we need to do instead, I found after a lot of searching, let's see if I can find that reference again. Oh, it's, all kinds of stuff in here. Down at the bottom, a 0 rated comment, there's this reference to this event.stop method. And I searched through all the IE documentation, MSDN, terrible stuff. Found a stop method that only works on Internet Explorer 8 on the MS Gesture class. I found that if you look up events in their documentation, you'll just find IE9 documentation. I couldn't find any good documentation on IE8 at all. And maybe I just don't have a good Google foo for it, but I can't find it. But I did try it. And despite nobody in the world seeming to mention this online, it works. Check this out. If we go into here and we say event.stop, and then we go here and we refresh, and we draw, look at that. It's rock solid. It's awesome. So I'm a little nervous using a method that I'm not able to find any documentation on whatsoever. And it's got some weird behaviors. Check this out. If I put the event.stop before the code, somehow it stops it from working. I don't know. Is it throwing an exception? Is that what's happening here? Maybe maybe event.stop doesn't even exist. What happens if I say throw new error? Oh, that works too. I don't think event.stop exists. No wonder that comment was rated so lowly. Well, there's a trick. If you throw an exception in your event handler, it stops the default behavior. Wow, that's ugly. That is really ugly, but it works. Let's see. So we drag and then we see this. There's our error. Huh. And what happens if we go back to event.stop? Yeah. Doesn't exist. There is no such thing as event.stop. I don't know what this person was thinking. But the crazy thing is it works. Now, all the other things I saw suggested, and there were a lot of things suggested, like event.returnValue equals false and event.stop propagation. These were all suggested as ways of getting IE to prevent defaults. And none of them work. And having those defaults is really bad. You can't see it here, but I've let go of the mouse and somehow the default behavior swallowed the mouse up event. So we really do need it to prevent that default. So do we want to throw an exception? Huh. I don't know. It's an interesting question. Wow. I'm going to stop and research this a little bit further and see what I can find. I'm kind of, given that this really doesn't work well at all on IE if we don't throw an exception, and given that that does seem to solve the problem, it is a terrible hack, but I'm kind of inclined to do it. I'm going to pause, see what we can see, and get back to you. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to do it. It's terrible. It's the worst hack ever. I have never written code this bad in my life, but I've never tried so hard to make IE8 work before in my life either. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and put the code back. And I hope if you're listening and you know a better way, please comment. It seems it's incredibly hard to find information about how IE8 works. I looked for documentation on what happens when IE8 throws an exception. Maybe there's some sort of weird side effect I'm just not seeing that's causing that to make this work properly. I don't know. But what I do know is that it does seem to be working. So let's just do it. I'm going to go ahead and modify this code to be a little bit more expressive. There, we've got ourselves drawing a little line there, and that should still work. And then, yeah, let's write ourselves a new test. It does not allow text to be selected outside drawing area, even if prevent default doesn't exist. So what I'm thinking here is that we will do the, I guess what we want to do is we want to expect calling mouse down to throw an exception. And I'm not sure exactly what the syntax is for that, but that's what I think what we want to do here. I'm going to go ahead and stop and look at this and be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So the wording here is expect function to throw exception. So that should fail. And what I want to see it do is I want to see it fail on everything except for IE8. And then we'll, finesse it from there. So, by the way, during the break, I looked at the actual jQuery programming. And what it does is it does detect to see if preventive default exists, and it calls it, and then supports IE, specifically IE8, by calling return value equals false. That just does not work for the specific case of selecting text that we care about. Now, I've double checked. It does work. Prevent default works fine in IE9. So it's just IE8 we care about. So yeah, I am going to go ahead and do that. Do that crazy thing. So what I'm going to do is, I think what I can do, let's just see what happens if we say dump event.prototype.prevent default. Just going to see if we can ask it if it exists. So that should show exists on everything except for IE8. Of course, we've got that was just a global issue. Okay, so IE8 doesn't exist. Firefox looks like, yeah, looks like it's working the way it's supposed to. So what we can do here is say if event.prototype.prevent default. We can't just say event.prevent default because this is a jQuery event. Then what we'll do is event.prevent default. Otherwise, we will throw a new error that's basically IE8 workaround prevents default for mouse down. Yeah. Now there is an event handler that's exclusive to IE8 called onGestureStart or something like that. There's another way of preventing this drag, but in my limited testing of that offline, I did not manage to see that work for this case. Okay, so now IE8 is failing 8 times, and I presume that's because we're throwing all kinds of exceptions in our other methods. Boy, this is such a nasty hack. I'm going to go ahead and pause again and see if I can get that onGestureStart stuff to work. And if that doesn't work, then I guess we'll go with the exception. Back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. Yes, onSelectStart works. So I've added this onSelectStart, just return false according to some stuff I found on Stack Overflow, and just have that return false. And that does seem to solve the problem. Thank God. I still have no idea how to test this, but at least we don't have to throw an exception. So yeah, so there we go. The solution here is to return false from onSelectStart. Presumably other options are available too, like, for example, saying, well, I guess, yeah, we could say event.return value equals false, I presume, if I've got the order there correct. Yeah, we could do that as well. So, but just saying return false is just as good. So now the question is, how do we test that? I'm going to research that. Back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. I think I've got this figured out. What we need to do is basically exactly the same thing we're doing up here. We say it does not allow text to be selected outside drawing area and works on IE8, including IE8, yes. And what we're going to do here is exactly the same thing. We're going to say drawing area on select start. And then we are going to say expect the event to be default prevented. Expect that to be true. And then we'll do a send mouse event, select start 2030. And that should fail because we don't have the select start event captured. So we should see that fail. Missing semicolon as usual. Yes, that fails. And if we look at it manually, we can see that we're getting that drag behavior. And now we should be able to say drawing area dot select on select start event dot prevent default. And I'm going to add a special comment. This event handler is needed so IE8 doesn't select text when you drag outside drawing area. Now, prevent default doesn't exist on IE8, but what will happen here is jQuery will turn this into a return value equals true, and it will set the is default prevented parameter here. So this test should now pass, and it does. That's awesome. This should now work, and it does. Fantastic, and it should still work on Firefox, and it does. And I'm not seeing any errors. All right, that was a bit of a long episode, but that brings us to the end of this chapter. What we've done now is we have handled all of the special cases in our mouse event handling. We've stopped the drag when it moves outside the drawing area. We've don't select the text when the drag is started within the drawing area. We've done some exploratory testing, and as much as I want to do on that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do the integration piece offline, and we will do this stuff later. What we're going to do next is the iOS touch events, and that'll be fun. I just want to review how this works. What we're doing is we're simulating mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up events by sending those over to our, by making a jQuery event, setting the parameters, and then triggering. And then here we are doing most of the work by having our mouse down, mouse move, and mouse up events operate on the drawing area, and then handling the special cases by preventing defaults on mouse down, which is what prevents the text from being selected, and also by preventing default on select start, which is what makes this work on IE8. So, wow, that was quite the adventure, quite the chapter. I'm so glad we didn't have to do that exception stuff. That is all for this episode. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you next time when we'll start up with iOS touch events. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you then.